Welcome to this lecture on Fitness to Practice, Meeting Standards for Pharmacy Professionals. This lecture was recorded by Kate Fletcher, Associate Professor of Pharmacy Education and Practice. This lecture is preparatory work for your workshop next week on Fitness to Practice with myself, Dr. Rosemary Lim.
So you will have all heard of the General Pharmaceutical Council. It's the regulatory body for pharmacists, pharmacy technicians and for registered pharmacy premises in Great Britain. So that includes England, Scotland and Wales. Northern Ireland has its own regulatory body. The website can be found at the link here on this slide. So all of the information that you could possibly need about pharmacy regulation in Great Britain is there. The GPHC also sets the standards for and approves the education and training for pharmacy professionals. So you'll be aware that the programme at Reading is an accredited programme, and it's the GPHC that accredits and approves education for pharmacists. It also maintains and regulates the register of pharmacy professionals. So when you go through your pre-reg and go through to registration, the register is held by the GPHC. So the main thing this lecture is about is the standards for pharmacy professionals and how it relates to you as a pharmacy student as well as to your career as a pharmacist. So again, here there's a link to the student section of the GPHC website. So do follow that link and take a look at what is there. The information on this slide is taken from the standards document, and the link to the PDF of that document is at the bottom of this slide. So the standards for pharmacy professionals are relevant to all pharmacy students and trainees. So trainees is another word for pre-registration pharmacist. And it's relevant to you throughout your journey towards registration and then onwards to your practice as a pharmacist. The standards explain the knowledge, attitudes and behaviours that will be expected of students and trainees if and when they apply to join the register. They should be interpreted in the context of education and training and used as a tool to prepare students and trainees for registration as a pharmacy professional. So that interpretation is by both you as a student and also by us as pharmacy educators. And this lecture is an example of using the standards as a tool to prepare you for registration. Pharmacy students and trainees should consider the standards as they move closer to registration and professional practice, and should read them alongside other relevant documents that are provided by us as your initial education and training providers. We will refer to the standards throughout the next 4 years, and so it's really important that you're familiar with them now and moving forwards to the rest of your pharmacy career. So you may ask, why are the standards relevant to me as a student? So pharmacy is a registered healthcare profession, and it carries both privileges and responsibilities. And so as a student, you need to demonstrate that you're able to exercise those privileges and to bear the responsibilities so that you can move forward to be an effective and responsible healthcare professional in the future. To this end, you are expected to conduct yourself professionally at all times. It's a requirement that our School of Pharmacy has fitness to practice procedures for you, and if you do not abide by the standards as a student, you may be subject to those procedures. And this lecture is one of the first or the early stages of the fitness to practice procedures to make you aware of the standards and how to fulfill them in order to not be liable to fitness to practice procedures. If you are found to be in serious breach of the standards, you may not be allowed to progress with the course or register with the GPHC. So as you can see, following these standards now is really important. It's also worth remembering that when you're a pharmacist, the standards play a role in the revalidation process for registered pharmacists and pharmacy technicians each year. And so being familiar with them will help you to have successful revalidation. So the standards, these are about how pharmacy professionals should behave in order to provide safe and effective care, and person-centered care and professionalism is at the forefront of the standards. They are a statement of what people expect from pharmacy professionals. So remember, that's patients, the public in general, what we expect from each other as pharmacy professionals, and what the GPHC expects of you. The standards, as I've said before, apply to you now. So they show you what's expected of you during your time here as a student, both when you're on campus and when you're off campus on placement or work experience, even if that work experience is not university organised. Obviously, as a pharmacy student, the standards still apply to you. So they apply at all times. This is an infographic from the GPHC, which describes the 9 standards for pharmacy professionals. And here we have them listed. So we're going to go through these, each of these standards in a bit more detail over the next few slides. But this is a good summary, and this is something that you should be reasonably familiar with and be able to quote most of the standards or all of them in one way or another. It doesn't have to be in order, but you do need to be familiar with these. So, number 1, providing patient-centered care, or person-centered care as it tends to be referred to now. So there's a wide range of ways to achieve this, as you can see by this list. I'm not going to go through every one in detail, but one of the primary things about providing patient-centered care is ensuring that you gain consent from the users of your services and expertise for you to provide that care. Also key to patient-centered care is involving, supporting and enabling every person to participate in their care and to make decisions about their care and well-being. So it's really important to provide relevant information in a way that patients can understand so they can make informed decisions and choices. And one of the things that we'll be teaching you over the next few years is communication skills and bearing in mind how to communicate effectively with somebody who is not a healthcare professional. Other things that are important here towards the bottom of this list, it's important that you take responsibility for ensuring that person-centered care is not compromised because of your own personal values and beliefs. And so in many ways we have to set those to one side when we're dealing with patients, and to respect their values and beliefs, to come to agreed plans for their care. Number 2, or standard number 2, is working in partnership with others. You'll probably already have an idea of how in the multidisciplinary team, for instance, and the many healthcare professionals and social care workers social care professionals there are, that partnership and teamwork is really important in healthcare. So we're not just thinking though of other healthcare professionals in this standard, we're also thinking about the person receiving the care, so your patient, and that may also involve their carers or their families. It's important to be aware of all the individuals and teams involved in a patient's care so that you can ensure that you're working in partnership with them. As a pharmacist, you need to be able to demonstrate effective team working, and that's why throughout the programme you'll be working in teams of various kinds, so you start to learn how to build your skills at team working. Also, communication is key to this, obviously, and you'll learn how to adapt your communication style when you're working with different people to make it suitable for those people. So number 3 is communicating effectively. As I've mentioned, you need to be able to adapt your communication to meet the needs of the person you are communicating with. You may need to overcome barriers to communication. They could be more of a physical type of barrier, such as somebody with impaired hearing, but also there could be language barriers and other social and cultural barriers to overcome. So you'll be learning and thinking about those in the programme as well. You'll learn how to ask questions effectively and how to listen actively to the person you're communicating with. You'll learn how to check the person has understood how you have conveyed your information. Moving on to standard number 4, pharmacists must maintain, develop and use their professional knowledge and skills. So clearly you're at the beginning of this part of your career in terms of developing your knowledge and skills, but it's very important that you're aware of the limits of your knowledge and you learn to refer to others when needed. So for instance, when we start responding to symptoms at lectures next term, you will learn about the red flag symptoms and when it's appropriate to refer a patient to a doctor or other healthcare professional. You'll be learning how to use evidence to make your therapeutic decisions, and you'll be learning how to maintain and record your continuing professional development or CPD activities. And this is not only obviously essential for safe practice as a pharmacist, but is also a requirement to maintain your registration and perform your revalidation each year, as I mentioned earlier. The recording of your activities is something that you're doing in your PAD portfolio, and this is preparing you for recording CPD and doing your revalidation once you're qualified. So being at university is, graduating from university will not be the end of your learning. Pharmacy is a career that requires lifelong learning and development. So standard 5, using your professional judgment. So this is kind of a bit related to the first standard, which is delivering patient-centered care. Make the care of the person their first concern and act in their best interests. So this is related to patient-centered care. Using your professional judgment in making decisions and remembering that those decisions should be made with the person or patient and carers. Again, towards the bottom of this list, recognising the limits of their competence relates to the previous slide and previous standard. So not working outside of your limit of competence and referring to other pharmacists or other healthcare professionals when it's appropriate to do so. Standard 6, behaving in a professional manner, and this we clearly expect of you right from the beginning of enrolling in the pharmacy programme. So we expect everybody, students and staff, to be polite and considerate, to be trustworthy and acting with honesty and integrity, showing empathy and compassion, treating people with respect and safeguarding them, and maintaining appropriate personal and professional boundaries with the people they provide care to and with others. So the being trustworthy and act with honesty and integrity particularly relates to you as students in terms of cheating and plagiarism. Obviously, you shouldn't cheat, you shouldn't plagiarize other people's work, and this is supported by the standards for pharmacy professionals. So you can see how if you're identified as doing these things, this would be a fitness to practice problem that we would have to be addressing. Maintaining appropriate personal and professional boundaries, particularly in this time or this age of social media, it's important to bear in mind it's not always appropriate to be friends with people on social media if they're your patient, for instance. So think carefully about who you add to your accounts. Standard 7, respect to maintain persons' confidentiality and privacy. So you'll be reminded about this before you go on placements, and you'll be signing non-disclosure agreements to remind you that you must keep information private, not just patient information, but also things that could be commercially sensitive for companies that you may visit. You should be very careful where you discuss patients. It shouldn't be in the lift in the hospital, for instance, with other people in the lift with you. It shouldn't be in the canteen when you're sitting close to other people. It shouldn't be walking down a corridor when you're surrounded by other people. Be careful with paperwork and with digitally stored information. Always be careful with your usernames and passwords for patient record systems and things like that. Standard 8, a very important one. Speak up when you have concerns or when things go wrong. So this is about learning from errors, identifying errors and learning from them. We want to challenge poor practice and poor behaviours and make sure those practices and behaviours are changed for the better. This obviously is something that the GPHC is concerned about, and poor practice could be reported to the GPHC, and it could put registration in jeopardy. So very important to be aware of this. It's important to be open and honest when things go wrong, not to point the finger and blame people, but to identify how errors have occurred and try to make sure they don't happen again. So we will often get you to reflect on things that you've done, placements, for instance, so you can identify what went well, what went less well, and what you can improve on. It's always important to take responsibility for errors, so saying sorry. This is related to the duty of candour that we looked at when we were looking at ethics. So it's really important to speak up when things go wrong so that they can be preventing from going wrong again. So how might students be identified as something having gone wrong, or any practitioner, any pharmacy professional really? So this could be a pharmacy professional participating in criminal activity, it could be malpractice, impropriety or fraud, failure to observe the law, not observing health and safety practice and protecting each other, employees, perhaps colleagues or patients, being bribed or bribing somebody for your benefit, damaging the environment, disclosing confidential information, academic misconduct, conduct as mentioned before, plagiarism and cheating exams would be something of concern. Failing to declare a health condition that affects your work, and suppressing or concealing any of these things could also lead to serious repercussions for the pharmacy professional and potentially disciplinary action. And finally, standard 9, pharmacy professionals should demonstrate leadership. So here it's important to remember that you must take responsibility for your own practice. And as a pharmacist, you may often actually also be a manager. So you need to take responsibility for yourself and also demonstrate leadership with the people that you may be working with and leading. As you develop, not only once you're qualified, but also as students, you may be able to contribute to education, training and development. So for instance, as fourth years, you may be able to be involved in the teaching and support of part 1, 2 and 3 students. And moving forward as a pharmacy professional, it's almost certain at some point that you will be training people or providing education to them. Really important to not abuse your position or set out to influence others to abuse their position. So always have respect for the people that you work with. Lead by example, and particularly to those who are working towards registration as a pharmacist or technician or other pharmacy professional. So thinking about students in particular, so mentioned some issues that may be of concern in relation to Standard 8, and following on from that, if a student who's studying pharmacy was involved in any kind of legal offence, conviction, drug or alcohol misuse, inappropriate behaviour, that could be physical violence, psychological violence, verbal violence, other inappropriate attitudes towards other people, cheating or plagiarising, any kind of dishonesty really, and that does include outside of the professional role, so outside of being a pharmacy student, being unprofessional in any way, or if there are health concerns with the pharmacy student who was not dealing with those concerns. These may be all reasons that a fitness to practice concern may be raised about a student. So to summarise, the standards apply to you now and throughout your career as a pharmacist. It's really important that you are familiar with them. It is your responsibility as a student and as a registered professional, and you need to be familiar with how you can meet the standards. And remember that standards are used in the pharmacist revalidation process. So you will be learning how to complete that process with us moving forwards. But the standards will be with you throughout your career. So I guess really embrace them, use them as a support to guide you in how you need to develop yourself to become a good pharmacist. So thank you for listening to this screencast. Next week in the Blackboard Collaborate session, we'll be looking at some scenarios and looking how the